called kingdominnovation.info. And you can check out all of the past recordings. And JD, I went ahead and started the recording, and so you can take it away whenever you're ready.
All right, fantastic. Well, welcome everyone. It's good to be with you again. Jon and I have been doing one of these a month for the past 5 months, and so we have one more to go, and so that will be, Lord willing, next month, and we'll share the date with you toward the end of our session today. The format that we'll use today is very similar to what we've done in the past talks that we've had. We'll probably spend 20, 25 minutes or so just sharing related to the topic of the day. And then we want to encourage you to type in questions, comments, and then maybe allow us to take those for a good 30 minutes and have some interaction with you as well. Our topic today is from vision to reality, acting on your idea. From vision to reality, acting on your idea. And so just this past week, I was reading through the book of Proverbs. Usually twice a year, I'll during my quiet time each day with the Lord, I'll pray through the book of Proverbs, and I'm going through Proverbs right now. And came across this verse in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21. And the verse says, "Many are the plans in the mind of a man, but it is the purpose of the Lord that will stand." In other words, as men and women, we have these visions, we have these desires, these things that we want to see carried out for God's kingdom, for His glory. But we trust in a sovereign God whose purpose is the one that stands. And so what we're going to talk about today is really a culmination of the previous conversations that we've had. So if you go back to the very beginning, we talked about the biblical theological foundations for innovation, and then we began to get more and more practical. And so today we're really going to be moving in the direction of how do we take those plans that are within our heart that we are seeking God's guidance on and actually move them to action steps. And so today's discussion is along those topics. But if you were with us last month, you know that you had a homework assignment. And so who did their homework? Jon, how about you call them out and remind them on that one?
Yeah, just a reminder for you. We had asked you last time, remember, it was about innovative listening and strategically listening to your team, to your audience. That was the theme last time. You can go to kingdominnovation.info and watch that webinar. But I just want to remind you of the assignment, which was to practice being receptor-oriented during at least 3 of your conversations during the month. So hopefully some of you got to do that. Really ask people or ask yourself, how is this person hearing me, right? And then how am I understanding what they're saying? Am I understanding what they're really trying to tell me? Am I withholding judgment? Am I reflecting? Am I summarizing what they're saying? And then am I sharing what I heard them say as I talk to them? So as we talk today, maybe use, if you didn't get to do the assignment, or maybe you weren't on last time, even use this webinar as a time to try that receptor-oriented listening as you try to listen to us and try to process what we're saying and how we're interacting. So just as a reminder to go back and listen to that one if you didn't get to hear it. It's a really important part of innovation. If you're not listening, then it's a good chance you're really not innovating. So over back to you, JD.
So to kind of start us off with our conversation of the day, thinking along the lines of Proverbs 19:21, many are the plans in the mind of people, but it's God's purpose that's going to stand. Jon, one of the things that we talked about in a previous discussion was basically idea generation. So how do you come up with these ideals, these thoughts? We talked about whiteboarding and things of that nature. And obviously, when you put a team together, there are going to be good thoughts that will come out of the process. And so a lot of good ideas, a team will generate when it comes to them moving in the direction of innovation. But so here's a question maybe I'll throw out to you, Jon, to kind of get us thinking today. And that is every good idea the one that God is wanting you and your team to implement?
Yeah. I think this is one of the hardest parts of innovation is learning when to say no.
Mm,
Because we are not called by God to do everything that pops into our heads. But a lot of things that pop into our heads sound like really good ideas, right? And so one of the ways that innovation intersects with the kingdom is in this area of discernment. How do I know when a cool new idea we just brainstormed in our team meeting last week is one I should try to implement? And how do I know when it's something I should set to the side, maybe something that someone else needs to do? I think it takes this close walk with God of prayer and discernment to be able to figure that out. And one of the great examples in the Bible that I just love is the story of David and building the temple, right?
oh
So
yeah,
David,
that is a good one.
yeah, David's sitting there. He's kind of done all his conquering. He's kind of built his kingdom. City of Jerusalem's coming together. He's sitting in his beautiful palace and going, man, I'm realizing that God's still out in that tent, right? That was his perspective, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we know God's
Right.
not just in a tent, but
Yeah.
that was such a core part of how the Israelites viewed their relationship to God, the tabernacle and all that. It's like I'm here in a palace and God's in a tent. That we need to do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
So he has an idea. It's a great idea, right? But then he doesn't just simply go out and implement it. He starts to talk to God about it. He talks to Nathan, who's kind of his key prophet, who's helping intermediate between them, and God comes back and says, you know what, David, great idea, but it's not for you to do. I want your descendants, your son, to do it.
Right.
So all of a sudden, David had a decision to make. He could have went ahead and done it, right? He had the power. He had the materials. He had the manpower. He could have said, God, I must be hearing you wrong. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Or he could listen to what he heard God saying, right? And what we see in the Bible, in 2 Samuel 7, that's when David realizes that it's not going to be his thing to do. So
Right.
he begins to invest in Solomon and others and prepare the way. But then we see in 1 Kings 5 where God uniquely positioned Solomon to do this, and how much greater it is that when Solomon did it than if David had done it. And I wonder, JD, if you've ever had an example in your life where you had to say no to something you really wanted to do for the kingdom because you felt it wasn't the right time. Anything that comes to your mind?
Yeah,
In that regard?
numerous times. Good ideas, good people, godly people with good ideas, bringing those to the table. And because the timing wasn't right, the circumstances were not right. Because sometimes I personally, as the leader of the team, wasn't really convinced that's what we needed to do. There's times to say no. I remember as a pastor, would have people to come to me and they would talk about starting new ministries, great ministries, fantastic opportunities in the community. I believe their heart was in the right place, but we just at that point in time, we weren't poised to do that. And so usually what I would do, and again, I wasn't trying to be mean or push the buck off onto someone else, but basically what I would do is I would let them know, I would take it very seriously and consider it and pray about it and talk to other leaders about it. But I would often say, maybe the Lord is laying that on your heart to help move us in that direction. What can you do to help us possibly go in that direction? It may be that we don't go in that direction, but instead of just having that idea, giving it to me, how about maybe beginning to move forward? And so there have been many times where I would have to say, no, I just can't, or we just can't move in that direction at this point in time. But at the same time would affirm and encourage that sister or that brother, and ask them and encourage them to maybe begin to move a little bit in that direction and see what happens. The truth is that it often did not come about. They often did not move that far down the line. And so I think one of the things of being a good leader is we just have to learn to say no sometimes. And that's hard to do, especially if you're in like a pastoral type of ministry, or if you have a very strong, pastoral heart. To say no to people is often a difficult thing to do, but it's necessary.
Yeah, one thing that I'll point out, I'm right now working on a new innovation project where I work at SIL International,
Hmm.
and as I'm building out that prototype, um, I'm getting a lot of people coming and saying, "Oh, we could try this related to it, right? What about this
Hmm.
angle on it or whatever?" And what I've found has been really helpful in my discernment process is to ask a few key questions. Is to say, "So who's excited about this, right?
Hmm.
Is God bringing a team together around this certain idea or this certain aspect?" Because if it's just an idea someone throws out, but no one's excited about it, no one wants to follow through, then maybe God hasn't provided the laborers because He doesn't want us to do it, right? That
Right.
sort of.
Yeah.
And another key question is the situation aligned? A lot of times, I've seen God show that He wants me to say yes because
Hmm.
a bunch of things have come together just at the right time. I just took advantage of a certain opportunity that took quite a bit of my time to be at a certain event and put together a certain strategy. But the reason I said yes instead of no was that a whole bunch of things lined up in a really cool way where I
Hmm.
could see that God was doing something here. And
Right.
so and so I allowed God's use of that to really to really help me to say yes, right?
Hmm.
To help me say yes to that.
Yeah, and I think sometimes the discernment comes by making certain, kind of going back a few, months ago in our conversations, making certain that our core values, our vision, that we really sense that the Lord's leading us toward, our purpose, if you will, making certain that those are in alignment with this new idea, this new concept, and those that don't line up, then we have to really begin to say, well, maybe not right now. It may not mean that we never do this or never move in this direction, but probably not right now at this point in time would be wise for us.
Okay. That's good. That's good. Well, let's pitch it over to you, JD. Want to ask you, so let's just say that we've made our decision and we've moved forward and we're in the middle of implementing,
Hmm.
right? And as you know, the minute you implement a project, things start to go differently than you had expected, right? Nothing goes as planned, right?
It
We've all
only goes in a perfect direction in the meeting room near the whiteboard, right?
That's right. That's right. So we've all experienced that. We know that's going to happen, but somehow we're still surprised, right? Somehow we
Yeah.
think this time's going to be different,
Yeah.
So it's just human nature, I think, maybe, and some of us, especially as innovators,
Hmm.
tend to be optimistic, right? We tend to be overly optimistic sometimes. So,
Right.
JD, when you launch in um, and then realize that something hasn't gone quite as planned, how do you problem solve in the middle of implementing a new innovative project? What are some of the tips and things that you've learned in that process?
Yeah. I think to kind of answer that question, let me give you a quote from a couple of gentlemen that wrote a book several years ago that I read. It was called the title of the book is called Execution: The Discipline of Getting Things Done. So it's not about capital punishment; it's about executing strategy. The discipline of getting things done. Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. They make a couple of statements I think is important for us to kind of think about in light of what you mentioned there, John, and that is they refer to execution, the actual moving our idea to reality, moving our strategy from theory to reality. They say that execution is the missing link between aspirations and results. And then they continue on. They say that no worthwhile strategy can be planned without taking into account the organization's ability to execute it. And I would just add to that no worthwhile strategy can be planned without taking into account problems.
Mm.
And that is they will come. They will arise. Um, we shouldn't be shocked at them. I mean, you know, even in the process, I want to be careful here because I don't want to give the impression that Paul and Silas and his team went to a boardroom somewhere to script out a strategy to get to Philippi from where they were in Acts chapter 16. But even in the vision of moving to Macedonia, the vision of the Macedonian man, come over to Macedonia and help us. The vision of them going to Macedonia and eventually seeing Lydia and her household come to faith, Philippian jailer and his household come to faith, seeing the church in Philippi planted. It was not a smooth journey at all. I mean, you think about that. I mean, they get over there. So they're there for some time. They finally find some women by a place of prayer. They come to faith, but then the next thing Paul and Silas are being beaten and thrown in prison. So, I mean, I think we've got to recognize that in the fallen world in which we find ourselves, that even when we're carrying out, godly strategies, we're going to have oppositions. We're going to have problems that will arise. And so, how do we do two things? How do we anticipate the challenges that would come? And at the same time, how do we then move it from idea to reality? And I'll mention a couple of other authors that I found helpful when dealing with this issue of problem solving. Ed Dayton and Ted Engstrom several years ago wrote a book called Strategy for Leadership. Both of them believers, and both of them extensively wrote on the topic of global evangelization and leadership within missions and in the local church. And they talk about 7 steps to assist with the whole problem solving process. So when your strategy is being implemented, and problems come up, what are some things you can do? And I've kind of adapted them to my own preference, but I find inspiration, from them. So the first thing I would say, and a lot of this, I mean, when you listen to this, John, I mean, a lot of it's just common sense. I mean, a lot of it is just very simple. It's like, here's a problem. We got to figure out what to do with it. Right. So like kind of the first thing they say is, understand what needs to be done and to remove the problem. In other words, make sure that the thing that needs to happen to overcome this problem is, makes sense, that it's logical. Then they say, compare your problem to other problems that have been known to exist elsewhere. So, the challenges that you and your team are facing, they're not new. There's nothing new under the sun. There are other teams that have faced it and are facing it. So who can you talk to that's been going through a similar struggle, similar difficulty? Find out what they've been doing. A third thing that they write about is putting together what I call a mini strategy. So in your overarching bigger strategy, how can you create like a little mini strategy to overcome the problem? And then the next thing is basically develop your plan, your action steps to solve that problem. Now, you're going to find out that you may have to gather together some resources to overcome that problem that you didn't anticipate from the beginning, but that's a part of it. And then here's the thing I think it's critical: carry out your little mini strategy to overcome that problem, but don't lose sight of the larger strategy that you and your team are working toward into that.
JD, yeah. I really like what you just said about essentially a little project within a project almost. I think a lot of times when we see these barriers, we see them as nuisances or as impediments to roll out of the way as soon as possible. But a lot of times we don't see them as something to overcome or something to work on as a team. Yes. I love how you're saying if you treat it like a little project, you can essentially figure out what's wrong and work on a solution for it.
Yeah. What's that old story, whether it's true or not, I don't know, about Edison, and he tries 10,000 times to get the tungsten filament for the incandescent light bulb, and says, we at least know 10,000 things that won't work. I think what we have to do is we have to, like exactly what you said, John, we've got to recognize that this can be helpful to the team, helpful to our development. And then as we're working through this mini strategy, this project within our larger project, and not losing sight of the bigger vision, what we're doing is we're collecting wisdom and knowledge that can help us overcome challenges in the future. So, learn from that little problem you're working around trying to overcome, and use the results to assist in solving future problems. Don't just see it, overcome it, move on. File that process away, learn from it, because that will help you. There'll be principles that you'll discover about yourself and your team that will come out of that the heat of the moment in that crucible that you'll be able to use later, in the future.
And one thought as well that comes to my mind, JD, is I think when we get in that problem solving mode, we tend to forget to bring God into that moment, right?
Oh, that's so true. That is so true.
Oh, man. Because when you're in problem solving mode, your brain kicks into fix it,
Hmm.
and your brain doesn't kick into God, I need your help. I need you to show me things. And so because our brain goes into very tangible, get it done kind of thinking,
Hmm.
I think at that moment, a moment when we really need God's help the most in our innovation work, sometimes it's the moment where we are least likely to invite him, right?
I mean, that's exactly right. We can become very humanistic at this step in the process of carrying out our strategy. We talked about pragmatism in previous conversation, but at this point, it's kind of like when the heat is turned up, the pressure is there, that we often lose sight of the work of the Spirit and walking with God and desiring to see His plan carried out, and we just kind of set that aside and say, all right, let's just knuckle down and we can figure it out, on our own. And you're right, we cannot lose sight of that bigger reality. So, John, it's interesting you bring up that point, because question that I want to ask you um, is dealing sort of along those lines, because we have all this worldly knowledge. We have these worldly tools, models, methods, and things of that nature. So, can kingdom innovation work with the world's knowledge and tools for the practical implementation?
Yeah. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, JD, because one of the key areas where believers and kingdom people struggle with innovation is that innovation seems like an idea that is really all about applying the world's knowledge and avoiding
Hmm.
God's way, right?
Right.
That's just kind of how it can feel to people.
I think
You
so,
know,
and I think there are a lot of people that would even shy away from what we're talking about, are these conversations, because they would see it that way.
right. And then I've seen another group of people in the church who essentially have no trouble with it, but they have the opposite problem,
Yes.
where they don't involve God, and they kind of say, "Well, God, I've got this under control. This is my thing, and so I'll run this with the knowledge I have in the world, and
Hmm.
thanks for giving me the green light, and I'm good to go." That
Hmm.
sort of thinking.
Right.
So this area tends to be one where we either just struggle to engage with it from a biblical standpoint at all, or we struggle to involve the scripture at all, and struggle to involve kingdom ways at all. So I think one of the things that I think has become really, really critical is to understand the interplay, back and forth between walking in the spirit and using the world's tools.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of that, I immediately go to Nehemiah. I mean, he was the master at this, right? Here's a guy who was high ranking within the kingdom, a secular kingdom that he was working in. He was
Hmm.
having to do a job that required a high level of competency and skill within, and to a lot of discernment on his part. But when he heard about the state of the wall, what was the
Right.
first thing that he did? He
Yeah.
immediately went to prayer.
Hmm.
Immediately went to prayer. But then he didn't stop there, right?
Hmm.
Then he immediately went to the influence that he had, which was with the king, and
Yeah.
presented his case, right? And we see in Nehemiah's life back and forth this kind of almost seamless ability to be walking in the spirit, yet using the tools and strategies and opportunities he had in front of him. I mean, when he was sitting there at the wall, and Sanballat and the other, local regional powers were like threatening him,
Hmm.
um, he of course went to prayer, but he also armed his workers.
Right.
They
Yeah.
had a sword in one hand and a bricklaying tool in the other
Yeah.
hand, and
Yeah.
and they were doing both things. They were praying like crazy. They were building that wall. They were defending, and all those things were happening seamlessly in Nehemiah's leadership.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. They saw God's hand in this. They were walking by faith, but if they had just sat there on the ground, the wall would never have been built. They actually had to apply worldly means in order to get it done.
That's right. That's right. So I'll give you an example right now. I'll book that many will be familiar with, but Lean Startup by Eric Ries.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people in the innovation space will hear about the idea of Lean Startup, um, and uh, and the business model canvas, which he promotes. So this is a tool to help you kind of design your innovation project. And if you go to any webinar or any session on innovation, you're going to hear about Lean Startup. You're going to hear about the business model canvas. I would encourage you to Google that if you've never heard about it. But this is just a regular tool, some guy came up with, and it's simply a tool to help you to plan out what your business model is and your business strategy for your innovation. And the danger would be to say, I've got a vision from God to do this thing. Okay, God, thanks so much. you know, I'll check in with you later. Now I pick up, Eric's book and the Lean business model canvas. I get offline. I download the template. I start filling it out,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't even consider what God might say about that process.
Right. Yeah.
The other way to do it is to say, God, as I fill out the business model canvas, I'm going to do it in prayer, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to do it using all the discernment tools that God has given me and all the tools about how he's taught me to care about the people, the audience I'm trying to reach. And I'm going to integrate those things.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that work in your work, in your ministry, JD? I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah. I think that's the only way that carrying out strategy is to be done, because I think what we've come to the point in church history whereby the sacred and secular dichotomy continue to exist in our minds.
That's
And
right.
it's most unhealthy, because who owns the universe, who created the universe, who set truth in the universe, whether it's in the realm of psychology or leadership, whether it's in the realm of astronomy, whatever. I mean, it's God's. However, along the journey, because of where we find ourselves with the ungodly secular worldviews, of course, have created this anti-supernatural bias and run in the direction of leadership and management styles and things of that nature. And so then the church begins to just completely take a hands-off approach, and they say, well, clearly that's all ungodly. But the reality is it's a distortion of what God has instilled within his universe. I mean, he gave Adam and Eve work to do before the fall. And even after the fall, he expected them to work as well. And so God has wired his universe to be able to have these matters in it whereby his people can capture those and leverage them for his glory wherever we go. And so it doesn't mean that we have to buy into the presuppositions or the anti-supernatural bias of some that are out there when we read their book, when we listen to what they're saying. But it means that God is at work in the truths that play out in his cosmos. How can we as the church recognize that and use that for his glory? And so I see that. I see that throughout the scriptures. Your example of Nehemiah is a great example of that. And I mean, there are other examples. I mean, how did Paul get around? I mean, he used the means of technology to travel, during his day. He used letter writing. I mean, his communication approaches were very reflective of, of what it would be like to speak at that day and time. The fact that he's recorded as, when he stands up, holds up his hand before he speaks to King Agrippa and others. I mean, those were truths in the world of communications that you were supposed to do if you were a great orator at that point in time. We've got to recognize that that dichotomy is unhealthy, and we need to pull those things back in and capture them for God's glory as he intended them to be.
Yeah, I think one of the things that just jumps out at me related to this, and then we'll move on to the last question, is this whole area of integration. I think innovation thrives with an integrated mind.
Yeah, right.
When we are integrating our personal experiences, our faith, our professional understanding, various disciplines, when we're bringing those things together and letting them inform each other, that's when the real innovations are happening. like you said, the silo thinking that for so many years was just the norm is an innovation killer
Yeah.
in a lot of instances. Well, let's
Right.
go to our last question, and then
Okay.
we'll go to questions from others.
Sounds great.
JD, I want to kind of ask you a little bit about this issue of as we're in the middle of a project, and like you talked about before, you got to be problem solving, overcoming barriers and all that.
Hmm.
But sometimes a project actually needs a refocus,
That's
right?
right. Yeah.
We learned something new in the innovation process. We go, man, that direction I was headed, really, I can't keep going there. I gotta pivot a little bit.
Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit about how do we do that in a kingdom way? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to happen. We're going to lose focus, and it's just inevitable. It's just a part of the drag that occurs as we are trying to scramble with all these moving parts of trying to carry out a strategy to innovate, overcoming problems, developing these little mini strategies with projects within projects. So it's going to happen. So we have to again anticipate this and recognize that refocusing is very much needed for us and for the team. And it's really just causing the team to pause for a moment, just kind of catch a breath, and then reorient oneself to the bigger task at hand. There was an article that came out in Forbes online by an author, Joran Krogenbrink, very interesting spelling, European spelling there. The title of his article was 20 Reasons Why Strategy Execution Fails.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the most difficult part of moving in the direction of innovation, and that is executing your strategy. Anyone that writes on strategy talks about it, seeks to lead teams to implement it. This is where the breakdown happens. And I'm not going to go through all 20 of those reasons why he mentions that failure occurs, but just listen to some of the common threads that I picked up in this article that he wrote. So some of the reasons why strategy breaks down: poor communication among the team, poor commitment to the vision, not enough resources, confusion with your action steps, unclear goals, unclear strategy. You mentioned a moment ago teams working in silos. That's another thing. Poor leadership, people resistant to change, a strategy's too complex. What he picks up on in this article is, I think, a very real issue, and that is there are multiple things out there that are going to cause a team to lose their focus. Mm-hmm. And we've got to be aware of those things before we get there, so we're not shocked, we're not surprised. A team's going to face many situations that will challenge them to often even compromise on their convictions of what they need to be doing. And so, sometimes compromise may say it's a faster way to accomplish the vision, but that may not be healthy for us as a team. So you really need to sit down with your team and think through, do this periodically from time to time. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? Now, I know those are basic questions, but we need to be reminded of that. And are we still on the right path? Do we still have a clarity of what we're doing? Do we, we had that meeting last week. Did everyone go away with the same understanding when we use this particular word or this particular approach? The leader, you as a leader for your team, needs to be that person that calls everyone together periodically to refocus. In this article, there was a scientific study that was done that basically said that in the strategies that they studied, that were not executed, that failed to be executed. This research project actually found that the average was about 50% of strategies that sought to be implemented did not work. If that is indeed the case, and that's where we find ourselves in, that means about every 2 attempts of whatever we do isn't going to work. Now, that was the average. I mean, they said some strategies worked 93% of the time, and some of them only worked 7% of the time. But I say all that to say the notion of refocusing is very, very critical for you and your team in this process of moving your vision to reality and acting on your idea. Don't let it slide. Don't forget about that step in the process.
JD, one thing that comes to my mind is in this discernment process on refocusing is it's really hard, I think, to know when do you push forward through the problem
Mm-hmm.
and when do you pivot,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you can some people just doggedly push forward on a strategy when everyone around them goes, man, don't they see that it's not working, they need to change something. But
Yeah.
other times the absolute right thing to do is to push through because it's a
Yeah.
hard thing. One of the things about
Yeah.
innovation is that it's going to be hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing innovative is ever just going to be a breeze and easy, right? Like, so just right now, in my project, I've come up against a challenge in the marketing strategy for my prototype, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one method I've been using isn't really working. So I could take two approaches. I could double down on it, say, I'm not doing enough of it, I got to do it harder. Or I could say, I wonder if maybe there's another way to get the
Mm-hmm.
same results.
Yeah.
And so I have to have a meeting even later today where I'm gonna, or maybe tomorrow. The meeting maybe tomorrow, but where I have to talk to my team and go, okay, we've been doing this, we're not quite seeing the result. Do we just
Mm-hmm.
need to double down on it because maybe we're doing it wrong, or maybe to change some of the language, or is this actually not the right way to get where we're going? We need to
Right.
try this way over here.
Yeah. I mean, that's a reality. I mean, and for every team, the answer is going to be different.
That's right.
Based on your team, your dynamics, the resources that you have, you may have the resources to be able to try it 7 or 8 times.
Yep.
In some cases, you may not, and so it's going to be a customized approach. But you and your team, need to really think through that process and figure it out.
And I think this is one of the ways where the concept of agile innovation really comes into.
It becomes more of the art than science. You're right.
That's
Yeah.
right, because rather than saying I've got a big plan and I'm going to implement it over 8 months and it's not going to change at all in that time,
Mm-hmm.
kind of what you're talking about here is that actually your plan could modify slightly every week,
But it's
right?
very possible. It's very
Right.
possible. I mean, you think about a pilot, you think about a captain of a ship. They're constantly readjusting their
Mm-hmm.
position based on the friction that's around them, whether it's in the airflow or whether it's in the ocean, and so we as leaders have got to do that.
Yep, that's right. Well, let's take some time for
Let's
questions.
do it.
Yep. So guys, out there attending, please feel free to type in the bottom right corner in the chat window any questions that have come up as we've been talking, something you might want us to clarify, maybe even an idea you've had that you just want to share with the group. Can take a lot of forms, but go ahead and start entering those in, and we'll take a few of those. JD, while we're waiting for a question or two, what else is jumping out in your mind about this process of implementation? Jay, any other thoughts come to your mind as we were talking about some of these different areas?
I think that what I said a moment ago about one of the biggest challenges is the executing of strategy. I do not think that most leaders recognize that that's where it often breaks down. I
Right.
think that a lot of leaders see it as a very simple approach, and even though it works out in our minds that it's in our mind's eye that it's simple, it often breaks down because we're in an environment where we're working with people. We're not working with robots or a computer that's predictable or something of that nature. We're working with context and culture and dynamics that are there that are always in flux. And so don't underestimate. I don't say this to hinder your work, but don't underestimate the challenge of the execution process.
I'll just give one little indicator that I use a lot in this situation to build off what you just said, JD, and then we'll get to these questions that are coming in. If you find yourself using the word just, or hearing people on your team or your boss saying just, that's a sign that people have taken for granted how it's going to go. So if your boss says, we're just going to, or it's just going to work like this, or that word is a red flag that people are oversimplifying or maybe or thinking it's going to go easier than it's really going to go.
That's right.
Well, so let's take the first question from Rick. He says, one big takeaway for me was expecting opposition to your project. How do you mentally psych yourself up for that. I think one of the things I'll
Yeah.
say, and then I'll pitch it over to you, JD. I think one of the things I do, Rick, is I I assume that there are other ways to think about it than my way. But I'll tell you, no matter how much you psych yourself up, no matter how much you try to put yourself in other people's shoes, it still surprises you when you think something is so obvious or this way is so natural, and then
Yeah.
someone doesn't get it. I think it's just really hard. What do you think, JD?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I have to have an emotional, check and make certain that this idea that I think is the next latest and greatest may not resonate well with the people I bring it to. And I've got to be prepared for that. And part of it is that we've got to allow time for God's Spirit to work in people's hearts. Often as leaders, we've been eating and sleeping and drinking and breathing in this new idea for some time. I mean, days, weeks, maybe even months. And then we roll it out and expect our people to be on board with it in 7 minutes. And we've been processing it for 7 months. And they're not that excited. And man, we just find ourselves getting defensive and getting upset, when in reality, that's not really gracious, because the Lord has brought us on that journey, and we need to extend that grace to people as well. So for me, it's just that emotional preparation. I just have to prepare myself, for that.
That's good. Jeff asks, are there more resources you'd recommend in addition to the book you mentioned to get better at execution? Strategy often comes more second nature for me. I think that's a great question, Jeff. It is easier to come up with a plan than it is to execute it well. One resource that comes to my mind is Christensen's Jobs to Be Done. If you type jobs to be done and Burger King into Google, you'll get a video, a TED Talk from one of the leaders of innovation thinking. And one of the things that he does is he looks at a new product that he wants to roll out, and he asks, what job does the customer need that thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And then he designs his execution around the job that the customer wants it to do. And I found that tool to be extremely helpful, because I may have this thing and I may say, well, to execute on this, I have to do these 5 things. But when I realize how the customer is actually going to use it, it actually changes my execution strategy. It helps me to kind of foresee some of those barriers or some of those challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Any other tools that come to your mind, JD?
I mean, I really like the book Execution, the one that I cited by Larry Bossidy and Ram Charan. I think that's just an excellent resource. But I will also say Forbes.com, Harvard Biz Online. Those are free and available, and quite frequently they will have leaders writing articles on execution of strategy. And so I would encourage you to check those out. Now, again, keep in mind, those are not written primarily from a Christian perspective. So you're going to have to filter it and process it through, your framework. But there's a lot of really good information that's out there and is free, and they're populating new material onto their websites quite regularly.
Yeah, another book I'd recommend is one called Little Bets. And it's essentially recommending a strategy of making of little phases of execution, right? Making little bets rather than these huge bets and these huge plans. Mm-hmm. Again, it goes more to this. I think if you type in agile innovation into Google, you are just going to get a ton of kind of the latest thinking on innovation execution that's much more iterative, rather than what we call waterfall planning, or where you come up with this huge strategic plan that implements over 4 years, and the minute you implement it, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
And so this agile iterative approach is kind of where everyone's going. And so the more you can read on agile thinking related to innovation implementation, the better off you're going to be. Let's go to Kathy's next question. She says, in an organization that's well established, what's the best way to introduce a new idea and get input and counsel? To whom should one go or approach? Good question. I think one approach that I've found is really, really helpful is having an advisory team or a design team. One of the things that I've done with my project within SIL is I've developed a design team within the organization and an advisory team within the organization. Some people that have more time and some people that have less time. Essentially, it's a bandwidth issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also a subject matter expert level issue. But developing those teams of people saying, I want to hear from people, but people can give input at different levels. Some people can, roll up their sleeves and dive in and really help me, to execute on this thing. And other people, they can give an input, a comment once in a while, but they're going to be able to give a lot less input.
That's a good
Creating
point.
those teams is really good.
Yeah, I would just say if it's in a local church context and you're not particularly involved on the leadership team, maybe talking to pastoral leadership about, do they see that the Spirit also works in the body and sometimes will lead the church in new directions as a result of what's happening in the body. Acts chapter 6, there's conflict between the widows of the food distribution was a reality that was taking place. Obviously the apostles saw that because they were having to neglect the preaching of the word. But I think we see throughout the scriptures also this notion of God placing his Spirit within his people, and that sometimes he begins new works through his people and not necessarily through the pastoral leadership that is there. I mean, you think about, Philip, for example. I mean, the thing that he did up in Samaria, the thing that he did with Ethiopian out in, both in Acts chapter 8, Peter and John go up into Samaria. So maybe having that conversation, if you're in a local church context, if you've got something that's on your heart, and sharing that vision, kind of casting it with the leadership can be of help.
Yeah, one thought I have on that as well is we tend to go to leaders very naturally when we're wanting to execute something. But I think a lot of times the people that are the most wise about a certain thing we're doing or the most able to help are people in the oddest places in our organization just because of their background, their experience, and so I think one of the things that we really have to do is really do a bit of a audit. When we're in an innovation place and we're really recruiting internally for our teams, right? Whether it's just advisory or whether it's really getting the work done, to do a little bit of an audit of our staff and go, who has some unique experience that I might, sometimes a person in the mailroom or a person who is in the finance department might have a ton to add to something that's implementation on the field in a certain way because of a unique way that they're gifted.
Right.
So I think a lot of times we need to go way beyond the institutional hierarchy of the organization when we're thinking about both counsel as well as help in that regard.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so the next one, William said, we have tried 4 disciplines of execution, aka 4DX. We've selected 2 goals, wildly important goals, and acting on lead goals, have a compelling scoreboard, cadency of accountability, results. We did have some degree of success, but it went slower than we wanted. I think that's what you're describing is a great matrix. I haven't heard of the 4 disciplines of execution.
I'm not familiar with it either. Yeah.
So I'm going to look that one up. That sounds like a really cool one. But those things that you're describing are it sounds like a great framework, a great matrix for thinking. But I love what William is saying, JD, about it going slower.
Yeah.
Man, let me tell you, I think most of the time, like I said earlier, innovators are optimistic. We have to go, whatever I'm thinking is going to happen on the implementation side, triple the execution time.
Yeah. It's definitely one of those areas where you grow in your patience. That is for sure.
Yep. And I don't think that's bad. I think that that we, for us who are overly optimistic, one of the things God wants to do in us is to build in us patience and to build in us long suffering. That's part of what he, when we do our project, I think God is very happy for that to be the case, because that's one of the areas that God wants us to develop. Now, in other people who are maybe slower to be willing to adapt and to change, God's trying to do the opposite in them. And so my hope would be in an innovation project in each one of the organizations of the people on our call today is that the innovator is learning patience, and the person who is reticent to implement is learning courage and the ability to move faster than they feel comfortable.
That's right.
right?
I mean, that's a great point. I mean, the innovation in the kingdom is much bigger than us accomplishing a task with our team. I mean, the Lord is working to conform us to the image of Christ,
That's right.
and he will do that through these processes of leadership.
Sometimes I think that some of the innovations that nonprofits take on
Hmm.
aren't for their beneficiaries at all.
No, 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 no. In
You
fact,
know,
unfortunately, sometimes people are seen as a means to an end. You
yeah,
can walk over those people; they're disposable. It's not like that in the kingdom, of course.
that's right. Right, yeah. And of course that's not always the case. A lot of times, of course, God is wanting us to innovate because he's wanting us to do something to reach more people for Christ, to
Hmm.
expand our boundaries and all those things. But I think sometimes God's first agenda is actually getting our house in order, getting
Hmm.
our minds in the right place, and he uses an innovation project to do that. But it means we're going to go slower. And like you said, JD, just now, this idea of not of saying I'm not going to walk over someone to get to where I want to get to, because if we're going slow for a reason,
Right.
there's a reason, and let's find out what the reason is.
Hmm. Yeah.
Now, sometimes you do have to have the courage to say to a person, the spirit of obstructionism that you are exhibiting is not of the kingdom. That can
Right.
happen as well.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
takes great courage.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I think we see examples of that in the scriptures as well. I mean, it's part of knowing your team and
right.
knowing the people, and some of those people you're going to have to be more gentle with, and some of those people you're going to have to be a little bit more heavy-handed. I mean, I think we see that in interactions with many of the early disciples, and even with Jesus, depending on the individual.
Yeah,
You can still have love, you can still have their desired development in Christ, but depending on the heart and what's going on, we're going to have to adjust our approach.
yeah, yeah. Even in Paul's work, think about the letter to the Ephesians or the Corinthians. You see Paul in some cases he's calling out a bad motivation, an unwillingness to do what is best for the church. And
Hmm.
in some cases, he's encouraging. He's saying, even if it takes longer, even if we have to work more at it, you're going in the right direction. So yeah, that again, so much of this comes down to discernment about methods and tactics,
Hmm.
not the method and tactic itself.
That's right.
Um,
Yeah.
so Amy is just saying she's appreciating the comment about the word just. I did a whole devotion. I did a whole Sunday school class on the word just and simply. What I'll say on that, just to build out on that, and then we're going to transition to our homework assignment. JD is um is I think the practice of switching out the word just for the word simply is a discipline in our language that actually causes us to take our thinking about what we're doing intentionality wise to another level. Just is a essentially a reduction word. It reduces things.
Hmm.
The word simply um, essentially builds things up or helps things become what they need to become. Words are designed in different ways, and so I would encourage people to try to switch out the word just for the word simply, and think about what that does in their mind as they have to do that, because it changes our implementation
Yeah.
on the ground. So JD, let's go to the homework assignment real quick. Let me read that.
Sounds great.
Um, so what we'd like you to do this month, because JD's going to share with you what next month is all about. It's going to fit in really well. Is we want you to pick one innovation that you feel God has given you to move forward. So go through that process of discernment, saying, "Is this something for me to do?" Right? Pick that one, and then identify your 4 or 5 next steps you need to take action. And we don't just mean strategy planning here. We mean actually doing something to make it happen. What's the prototype? Who's the team? When are we going to roll it out? What needs to happen to roll it out? We want you to come up with those 4 or 5 steps, and make sure that those 4 or 5 steps are bathed in prayer, that are a part of that discernment process. And when you come next month, we want you to really come having actually tried to implement something, even at the teeniest level. So you could make a project something super small, right? It doesn't have to be this big, grandiose thing. And try to do it and see what barriers you run into, see what challenges you run into, see what pivots you have to make. And then when we come next month and share what we're going to share, then hopefully that's going to much better inform what you're doing. So JD, tell us about next month.
Next month, the last one. It'll be a 6-month journey. John and I have gotten to know each other very well over the past 6 months. So here's where we plan to go next month, Lord willing, on October the 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. October 22nd, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have our final webinar in this series on innovation, and the topic that we're going to be addressing is case studies in kingdom innovation. Case studies in kingdom innovation. John and I both are going to share 2 personal examples of how we sort of walked through this process from the first conversation that we had 5 months ago up until today. And so what were those steps involved in that process? So next month will be two actual personal examples that John and I have worked with. John, I think you're going to approach it more from the mission agency perspective. Is that right? And I'm going to take it more from the local church perspective. Okay. Yep. So hope that you will be a part of our conversation, our time together next month, October 22nd at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Invite someone on your team to be with you. Any last words on that, John, before we pray and go today?
Yeah, I think the last thing I would say is that we've found that a lot of people will take these sessions and especially use the first half as a team discussion starter. Each of these will be on kingdominnovation.info. The URL is in the chat box. And within the next few days, we'll upload the latest one, but the last 4 are up there already. And you'll also see, the information to sign up for the next one. But using this as a discussion starter for your team and just watching it together and then interacting together and saying, hey, how do we implement this? It's a great way to do that in an informal, relaxed way that's not too intense. It's not too long, and so we'd encourage you to do that. So, JD, would you wrap us up in prayer?
Yeah, let's pray together. Thank you all so much for being a part of our conversation today. Father, we praise you for being who you are, and we thank you that, Lord, it is your purpose that prevails, even though there may be many plans, many ideas within our hearts. And so, Lord, we want to walk faithfully with you. We want our teams to walk faithfully with you. And, Lord, we don't want to get ahead of you. We want to be in your timing. Lord, we recognize that there will be challenges that will come as we begin to implement and execute what you want us to do. But Lord, give us grace. May we see your hand at work. Give us peace. Lord, give us discernment as teams to know not only how to overcome the challenges, but also to know how to relate to one another and to love and care for one another during those times of difficulty. Father, we ask that you would just guide each of us in the things that you call us to. And John and I just give praise for our brothers and sisters that are part of this conversation today, or those that may be watching by video later on. We ask that you would just fill them with your spirit, that, Lord, you would protect them from things of the flesh and the evil one and the world as they go forward in seeking to carry out what you place in their hearts. Lord, we thank you for this time that we could have together today, and we pray all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. All right, everyone. Have a great day.
See you guys. Bye.